Hey guys, what's up? Chris here with Cohesive Friendship Unit. Just me today. 3 years ago, I was standing outside in the cold at Best Buy playing Smash 4 on my 3DS for the last time, getting ready for the launch of the Nintendo Switch. I remember there were news reporters there, the line was wrapped around the store, and it took a very, very long time. I got back at like 2 in the morning, popped in Breath of the Wild for like 30 minutes, passed out, woke up, played Breath of the Wild for 12 hours, and then I felt pretty good for the next 3 years. And here we are in 2020 at the Switch's 3rd birthday. I want to talk about, reflect on the system, but talk about the good and the bad, but also talk about what I asked for or what I hoped that we would get in a hardware revision of the Switch, and, reflect on what I thought about last year. But before we get into everything, we are doing a giveaway for Copy Risk Rain 2 on your platform of choice. All you gotta do is be subscribed, so if you love us, sub us. And let me know down below how you feel about the Switch, like the state of the union of the Switch, so to speak. How do you think that it's standing up 3 years later? Not on that kickstand. It's not standing up too well on that. Speaking of the kickstand, what I wanted from last year, hardware-wise, I'm just going to highlight the hardware because a lot of the software stuff didn't come true, frankly. So once we get into the bad, I'll talk about that. I wanted a Switch with better battery and a better kickstand and better Wi-Fi. And the better battery was really the number one thing that I wanted. It's a lot cheaper to get a kickstand or to just prop your Switch up or to just hold your Switch. That's free, than to invest in like a $60 battery bank that can charge the Switch reliably and quickly. And yeah, they came through. Nintendo came through on both models of the Switch. This was before the Switch Lite was announced, obviously, because it was the 2nd anniversary. They came through really well. We have a Switch with basically double the battery life now. And we have the Switch Lite, which also has a marked improvement over the original design. We do still have pretty bad Wi-Fi, and we do still have that really bad kickstand. We don't even have a kickstand on the Switch Lite, so that is kind of a bummer. But that's kind of what I was asking for out of a new hardware revision, and at least they hit the biggest thing for me. But yeah, let me know if you guys were a little disappointed in the Switch revisions in 2019. But let's talk about some of the good things that came out of Nintendo's 3rd year having the Switch be their flagship platform. The first thing I want to talk about is sales. The sales are continuing to just blow away expectations, selling like hotcakes. There's still stock issues with the Switch from time to time, which is just insane that 3 years on, they're still just going balls to the walls, gangbusters. Specifically, I think the biggest milestone in the 3rd year was that the Switch surpassed the Xbox One lifetime sales, and I know that console isn't really reflected on as being that successful, but if you do think about it, they're estimated to be like in the realm of about 50 million units, and Nintendo Switch has exceeded that. That is a really good clip to be moving at 50 million units in 3 years, definitely. And the other good thing I want to talk about is the kind of retiring of the 3DS and how that has finally impacted the Switch. A big part of the idea of the Switch, beyond it being a hybrid console for the consumer, was that Nintendo was going to be able to consolidate their mobile development teams and their home console development teams, and that was going to allow more software theoretically to come out on a given platform. And that took a while to see, and a large reason why this kind of had to happen was the Wii U saw a lot of software drought, and that's partially because developing in HD was a lot more resource intensive and harder than Nintendo thought. So now that we've had a little bit of time since the 3DS is kind of sunset, we're starting to see the fruits of that development, where, yeah, there was a year, 2018, where we got a lot of Wii U ports it seems like now that mobile shift into the home console has kind of started to take place by the way of games of Luigi's Mansion 3, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Pokemon Sword and Shield, and Zelda Link's Awakening. I think at least the majority of these, you would argue, were definitely going to be released on the 3DS or whatever the successor to the 3DS was. Fire Emblem was locked on 3DS since the Wii. Pokemon's always been on mobile. Link's Awakening, we almost never see 2D Zeldas making a home console debut since Ocarina of Time, so I think a lot of people would have anticipated. Actually, there were a lot of rumors of Link's Awakening coming to 3DS. And Luigi's Mansion, that's a little harder argument, but at least the second Luigi's Mansion and the remake to the original Luigi's Mansion was on the 3DS, so it kind of seems like a natural extension. Regardless, it seems like we are starting to see the fruits of the labor, not only in getting more software frequently, but from getting getting more IP represented on your platform of choice. If you pick up a Nintendo Switch, you're now going to get Animal Crossing and Pokemon, where if you were just a Wii U owner and not a 3DS owner, you would have missed that round of those franchises appearing on the system. And yeah, I think that's a really great thing, and I think it's worked for Nintendo, both as far as getting more software out for consumers and for consumers having more options to pick from, and being able to take those home experiences on the go and take those portable experiences and throwing them up on your display when you want. Tied into sunsetting the 3DS, I do want to talk about the successor to the 3DS, that being the Switch Lite, which I think is a worthy successor to the 3DS. It's a huge leap in both ergonomics, graphical fidelity, everything. I mean, you're getting a much sharper screen at 720p. You're getting dual joysticks that are actually joysticks and not the circle pads. So you're getting the full standard control layout. Obviously, there's some problems with the Nintendo Switch Lite that I have, namely that it can't dock to a dock because it should be able to. It seems like an arbitrary lock on Nintendo's end, and there is no kickstand to speak of, and the Wi-Fi is still pretty bad. And this one actually matters quite a bit. I really do not like the Wi-Fi on the Nintendo Switch Lite, but for a system like the normal Nintendo Switch where you have USB ports when docked, you don't have that luxury on the Switch Lite, so it is kind of a bummer when your Wi-Fi is subpar. But yeah, overall, the Switch Lite is a great successor to the 3DS, and the Nintendo Switch line as a whole has been really great for Nintendo from both a home console and a mobile perspective, which is really, I think, more than anyone would have hoped for at Nintendo. But there are some problems with the Nintendo Switch still in 2020 on its third year out. A big problem in 2019, since we've had the system for 2+ years, are those Joy-Cons are starting to drift, and the drift has been getting a little out of control. It seems like the fundamental problems with Joy-Cons that are causing the drift is still not fully rectified, and while it is nice that Nintendo is replacing Joy-Con supposedly for free indefinitely, we'll see how long that lasts. It still is a shame to know that once all of this support kind of stops for Joy-Con, it seems like for collectors, right? Years from now, or if you're just trying to preserve your old console and want to play, Smash Ultimate in a 5+ years, those Joy-Cons seem like they're going to be the first thing to go. It just seems like a design flaw that is unfortunate that we're still seeing 3 years in, and it is a frustrating thing to deal with. And what's even more frustrating is it appears that the Switch Lite has the exact same Joy-Con, so that manufacturing defect is going to persist in a manner where you can't just slide off the Joy-Con and slide a new one in. You actually have to have your system serviced, which gives me a little bit of cause for concern on that Switch Lite. But there are more problems than drift. Let's talk about the online service. The big thing that we got for the online service, well, there were some niceties that came along, like more reasons to invest in the service from a software standpoint. It wasn't just Mario Kart and Splatoon. Now there's a lot of games ranging from Animal Crossing to Pokemon Sword and Shield, Smash Online. There's plenty of reasons to invest in the service, but the big thing that was the perk was the SNES games, the Super Nintendo games, and those are much better games to give to people to play. I've played them a bit, but it's just not replacing the virtual console in a meaningful way. And if Nintendo is planning on launching N64 games in September of 2020 and maybe possibly GameCube games in 2021, that is way too long to wait. To launch N64 games 3.5 years after the console launched when it could have done it right away, that's just leaving money on the table, Nintendo. And I don't really have a good answer, and I don't think anybody on YouTube has a good answer why we haven't seen better classic support. I know that the virtual console had mixed success, but this is not a better solution in my opinion. It's a much worse solution when we don't have access to libraries. And next, I want to highlight the issue with themes. And this is really not a big deal, but it's just like screaming to be there. There's a drop down where you can select your themes. There are 2 themes. There's white and dark, and it just, every other console, including Nintendo consoles like the 3DS, have had themes that you can do that are just better. And it's just weird because their little icons are actually kind of selectable. Like the icons that you can pick for your profile, that's a pretty good range of icons and colors. But themes, no. Like, God forbid you take that color palette that you can make your icon and just set that as the theme for your system. I don't know, this is nitpicking. This is why it's towards the bottom of the list, but still is annoying. And the last thing I want to talk about is a curated eShop. Since the Nintendo Switch has kind of exploded onto the scene, there has been a lot of software getting to the point where it's resembling the shovelware from the Wii era. And there doesn't seem to be any real way of combating that bloat when you enter the eShop. Nintendo isn't really curating the software in any meaningful way beyond a very superficial layer. It's very hard to browse in a meaningful and significant way. And that is kind of a bummer because there are a lot of really good games and really good ports that you kind of have to keep your ear low to hear about because you're not likely to find them floating around in the eShop. But that kind of sums up the good and the bad for me for Nintendo Switch. I do want to talk about the future as we carry on into the 4th year for the console. And I think the elephant in the room for this year is going to be the Xbox One Series X and the PlayStation 5. And the issue with the Nintendo Switch is there's already kind of limited third-party support on the system, and that might all but go away once we see the introduction of these new consoles that require just a much more hardware to run the titles provided. So I guess the flip side is a lot of the ports to the Nintendo Switch are PS3 and Xbox 360 games, but that in and of itself is going to make the Nintendo Switch start to look a little lackluster in comparison to something 2 generations ahead. Even if we do get a GTA 5 port that is effectively the PS3 and Xbox 360 version, that is not going to hold up against GTA 6 on the PS5 or, whatever. And the growing power disparity, I think, is going to be an interesting position for Nintendo. And this isn't really a good or a bad, it's an interesting conversation that you could have where you'll see the PS5 and the Xbox One Series X launching at presumably a higher price, and Nintendo is suddenly reverse the situation where towards the end of the Xbox One's life cycle and the PS5's life cycle, the Nintendo Switch was actually the more expensive buy at $300, where you could easily get these other consoles at like $200. Now it's suddenly flipping, where you could theoretically, well, you can definitely get a Switch Lite out for $200, but you could get normal Nintendo Switch down to about $200, while these other consoles are launching $500 or more, who even knows. So that's just an interesting position for Nintendo, where they're also now contending with being so much less powerful. And that kind of gets us into another thing. We're not approaching the late end of the Switch life cycle, but we're definitely right in the middle. And as we get right in the middle, it's going to be interesting to see and start to think about, well, what is the successor to the Switch? I don't think we need to see one for another couple years, but where are they going to go? How are they going to improve? Is it essentially going to be the same thing but faster? What's going to get people to buy it? These are just ideas to think about, right? And I think we're starting to get to that point now that there's some real competition ramping up for Nintendo. It's going to be interesting to see how everything pans out in 2020, the Nintendo Switch's 4th year and beyond. But that is all for me, guys. I will catch you next time.